بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبع هداه أما بعد. In this session we look at the last of the affairs that we wish to discuss in these brief sittings concerning the ahkam of Tajweed and some of the rulings around Tajweed, and a brief commentary upon the matan of Jazariyah. We want to look at the masahif, the versions of the Quran that are widely present. That is the mushaf itself, not the translations, but the mushaf itself. The mushaf, that is the pure Arabic Quran, that does not have with it the translated text, but the mushaf that many of you should have, whether you are proficient with the recitation of the Quran or not. You should have some masahif at home. In today's session we want to look at the normal mushaf, and we also wish to look at the mulawwan Tajweedi mushaf. That is the Tajweed Quran, the one that has the colorful print with some of the huruf and some of the letters, and for the most part is likewise present with many of you. If you have both of these versions of the mushaf, then keep them close by. We're going to be looking at them relatively soon, inshallah. And as we mentioned, we just wanted to look at some of the markings that are present and be familiar with the markings within the Quran. Hopefully by the end of today's session there will not be a marking or a symbol in the mushaf, except that you'll be familiar with its meaning, inshallah. And so as we mentioned in yesterday's session, ayyuha al-ikhwa, these sittings with the rulings from the ahkam of Tajweed, the intent behind them, ikhwan, is to better and to perfect as much as possible our recitation of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that will of course return back, as we've mentioned, the statement of Imam al-Jazari, the statement of Imam Abu Amr Dani. It will return back to practice, that is, that we actually read the book of Allah Azza wa Jal. It is not, ikhwan, just a academic area and a topic that we need to know more about, and so we learn about it but we don't actually put it into practice. Rather, when we learn, we put it into practice. We actually implement what we learn, ayyuha al-ikhwa. And so these affairs, ikhwan, we pay attention to them, we implement them with our recitation and with our teaching. If it is that we're teaching, for example, our children, or greater than that, Allah Azza wa Jal has placed upon us the trial of teaching in the masjid, mathalan. Even if it is that we teach the qaida nuraniyah, these ahkam and these rulings will be hugely beneficial for the one who teaches just the qaida. That is, ikhwan, what is hoped, that we implement these rules. And as we've mentioned, ikhwan, there are a number of affairs that we need to pay attention to, many errors, and we could have, we've had, I believe, over 30 sittings now with the matan of Jazariyah. We could easily have another 30 sittings just speaking about the various akhta and the various errors that people make in relation to the recitation of the Quran. Some of them are apparent and some of them are obscure, may not be clear except to the one who has studied something from Tajweed. We discussed and we looked at the affair of tarqiq and idhar and idgham and what have you. All of these are rules, ikhwan, that many of the Muslimun, many do not know and are not familiar with. And so you may find errors in relation to some of these rules. For example, in relation to tarqiq, we have errors that occur, in particular with tarqiq of Hamza. In particular with tarqiq of Hamza. For example, the the observation of making tarqiq of Hamza if there comes after the Hamza a fatha, a letter with fath or with dam, or if there comes after, if the Hamza itself comes after a letter of dam, it comes after a letter of dam or a letter of mad, a letter that has mad upon it. We find, ikhwan, that there are oftentimes errors, though they may be obscure, but they should be picked up, particularly for the one who teaches the Quran. That when one recites Hamza upon a letter, we observe tarqiq. We said that it is from the letters, ikhwan, that are muraqqaq. And so, if we hear our student reciting Allahu latifun bi'ibadi, we correct Allahu latifun bi'ibadi. Allahu latifun bi'ibadi. If we hear the student reciting قالوا آمنا, we correct قالوا آمنا. If we hear him reciting وفي أنفسكم, we correct, helping him to perfect his recitation. وفي أنفسكم, to make the idhar of the Hamza. Similarly, when the Hamza falls after a letter that has dam upon it, it is easy for that Hamza to, if one recites lazily, to start to resemble waw. مثلا قل هو الله أحد. This is an easy mistake, an easy error that we find many falling into. قل هو الله أحد, that he lazily recites ahad. And here again we correct. قل هو الله أحد, that he makes idhar ahad. قل هو الله أحد أحد. And so if we hear that Hamza resembling waw, we correct. Again, ikhwan, a common mistake. قل هو الله أحد, قل هو الله أحد, lazily. We hear the student reciting الذين كفروا وصدوا عن سبيل الله أضل أعمالهم. Again we correct. الذين كفروا وصدوا عن سبيل الله أضل أعمالهم. أضل أعمالهم. Make إظهار of the Hamza. أضل. Lazily he recites وصدوا عن سبيل الله أضل أعمالهم. Correct. And infer within and instill within your student an observation of some of these common errors, and that he pays attention or she pays attention to them. Tarqiq of ha and ayn and ha. Again, these are common mistakes that we hear people making. أأنتم أشد خلقا أم السماء بناها. بناها. Oftentimes بناها without the tarqiq. بناها. وما يلقاها. وما يلقاها. Again we correct. وما يلقاها. That we make and ensure that the talib observes tarqiq on those letters that should be recited muraqqaq. Similarly, izhar in relation to, which is another common mistake, lam al-fi'l. The lam that occurs in some of the verbs. وأرسلنا مثلا. A common mistake. وأرسلنا. 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 That this lam, it is made clear what oftentimes occurs is that the individual, he makes idgham almost. وَأَرْسَلْنَا السَّمَاءَ وَأَرْسَلْنَا, yani this merging between the sin and the noon and almost eliminating the lam. Again, we pick up on this. وَأَرْسَلْنَا. Another common word, وَجَعَلْنَا. Again, وَجَعَلْنَا, وَجَعَلْنَا. This is an error. We have here idgham, while the lam should be made apparent and should not be merged with the noon. وَمَا جَعَلْنَا, وَمَا جَعَلْنَا. Make the lam clear. وَمَا جَعَلْنَا أَصْحَابَ النَّارِ. وَمَا جَعَلْنَا, جَعَلْنَا. And so these common errors, ikhwan, we pick up on them. We make them clear as much as is possible, of course, to our ability. And we're not master qurra. Yani, the teacher himself is likely learning and is likely still considering himself a student of the fan and a student of the science. But he may be somewhat more advanced than one who is able to benefit from him, and so he shares that benefit with his student. And so these rules, ayyuhal ikhwa, again, we encourage the brothers and sisters to read the Quran, read the Mus'haf, ikhwan, and that is how you will get better. That is how your recitation will become clearer. That is how you will observe the rules, by looking at the letters. Oftentimes, even if we've memorized, if we do not look at the letters, sometimes, ikhwan, there is much that escapes us, and we return back to force of habit in relation to how we memorized the particular surah, and we do not observe some of the important rules that we've been missing for many years. Now, and so in order to move on then to the Mus'haf, the Mus'haf, ikhwan, that we want to look at is the print of the Mujamma' Malik Fahd, the Medina Mus'haf. We're not dealing here with the Hindi or the Indo-Pak Mus'haf, the one with the thick script. Rather, we're looking here at the Mus'haf from the Mujamma' Malik Fahd of Medina, and the varying prints of and versions of the same Mus'haf. In this Mus'haf then, what we want to do, or with the Mus'haf, what we want to do is look at some of the rules that we've already, the markings rather, the symbols that we've already looked at, reiterate them, and then to just complete our discussion of the rules of these markings, of these symbols, and what they stand for. And so if you open your Mus'haf, ayyuhal ikhwa, to Surah Al-Baqarah, the first page of Surah Al-Baqarah, the decorated page, from the beginning of the surah, after the basmala, we have Alif Lam Mim. If you observe, and we're purely here looking, ikhwan, at the markings, if you observe, and many of these points, I'm sure most of you will already know. This is for the one who doesn't know, and for the one who wishes to become acquainted with them. If you look at the Alif Lam Mim, over the Lam and the Mim, you'll see this line, this extended line that is over the Lam and the Mim. This line, ikhwan, wherever it occurs in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is a line that indicates mad. And that is, it indicates maddun lazim. It indicates mad lazim. And as we've said previously, mad lazim is extended for 6 harakat. And so we see there is no line over the alif, but there is, and as we've said before, alif is not extended when it occurs in the huruf al-muqatta'a. Yani there is no mad upon the alif, but lam and mim are from the letters that have mad. And so we have here maddun lazim harfi. Lam and mim We have mad lazim harfi, and that is indicated by these lines that are over both the lam and over the meme. We similarly previously discussed the following marking, and that is if you look across in the same verse, and in this initial verse, if you follow across the verse, you will see the markings that are present over the statement of Allah Azza wa Jal, La Rayb, yani present over the ba of La Rayb and over the ha of Fihi. These, as we've mentioned previously, are the alamat of ta'anuq. And these two markings are markings that indicate that one may stop upon one of those two markings. These three dots in those two places, we have in them this ta'anuq, which is the permissibility of stopping at one of those two places, but one may not stop upon both of them. And so, if one recites from the beginning of the ayah, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ, you can stop at fi, or ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. One may stop at one of those two markings, but not upon both of them. So it is not permissible to say ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. We stop at either the first or upon the second. If we move over to the second page in Surah Al-Baqarah, the first ayah, at the top of the page, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا سَوَاءٌ. One of the issues that we have not yet discussed is that which is related to the markings of tanween. The markings of tanween. The markings of tanween are of three main types. We have that which is considered tarakub, and that which is considered tatabu'. That is the first two, and the third we will come to inshallah as we look across the page. So if you observe the first instance, we have tarakub. That is that the tanween is drawn immediately, the two markings are drawn immediately above, one immediately above the other. As it relates to dhammatain, we have one dhamma, and then we have this, what is in essence an upseated noon over the dhamma. This symbol, ikhwan, when we have the dhammatain in this manner, and we have fathatain and kasratain likewise drawn similarly, that is, one is placed immediately over the other, and there are examples of that we will come to as we go along. If one wishes to see an example of that, then we'll point you towards mathalan, if we move from the page that we're upon now, to the page across, turn the page, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages. The ayah at the top, you should be upon ayah 59. You have the first verse, which is 58, and then it is followed by ayah 59. فَبَدَّلَ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا. If you look at the tanween and qawlan, فَبَدَّلَ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا قَوْلًا, ayah 59. If you look at qawlan, you can see the fathatain. We have this tarakub, that is, there is one immediately above the other. And kasratain, of course, ikhwan, will be similar. I can't see an example of that immediately, but we'll come to one, I'm sure. So when we have the fathatain and the kasratain, one immediately above the other, and go back, ikhwan, to the first page, sorry, the first ayah on the second page of Surah Al-Baqarah, where we were just looking, when you see the dhammatain, as occurs here on the hamza of inna alladhina kafaru sawa'un, when it is drawn in this manner, this is an indication of idhar. That is, you'll remember from the rules related to noon as-sakina and tanween, from the rules related to them, we have idhar, we have idgham, we have iqlab or qalb, and we have ikhfa. Idhar is that the tanween or the noon as-sakina is recited clearly, and the letter that comes after it is likewise recited clearly. And here then we have the symbol for idhar. This noon, or this fathatain rather, dhammatain, kasratain. When the fathatain and the kasratain are one immediately above the other, and when the dhammatain is drawn in this manner, yani one dhamma and what resembles an upturned noon over it, and this is the symbol that indicates idhar. If you go down to the following verse, ختم الله على قلوبهم وعلى سمعهم, to the end of the verse, and even before the end of the verse, upon the statement of Allah, غشاوة, and upon عظيم, at the end of the verse, وعلى أبصارهم غشاوة, you'll see غشاوة ولهم عذاب عظيم. And of course, we're pronouncing the tanween here just for purposes of indication. Here then, عذاب عظيم. If you look at both of these words at the end of the ayah, that is the 7th verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, you'll see that the tanween that is upon the ba of adhabun differs from the tanween that is over azimun. The tanween that is over azim is drawn in this manner, which is known as tatabu', yani one follows the other. Whenever we have the tanween in this manner, yani one following the other, then this is an indication of either idgham or ikhfa. So this symbol is used to indicate two rules, either idgham or ikhfa. And so with azim, we can see it there. Similarly, if we go across the page and look at the first verse on the following page, مثلهم كمثل الذي استوقد نارا. Here, naran, if we look at the tanween and the naran, the ra of naran, we can see the lines do not sit one above the other perfectly, as we saw in the example that we indicated earlier. Rather, there is something of a separation, a slight separation between the two, and one of them follows the other, and they do not sit one perfectly over the other. So when we have this tanween, yani whether it is fathatayn or kasratayn, in this manner, this is an indication again of either idgham or ikhfa. Of either idgham or ikhfa. And that is clear if you look at مثلهم كمثل الذي استوقد نارا فلما. We have here fa, tanween followed by fa, and fa is from the letters of ikhfa. If we go back over to the 7th verse, وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ. If you look at وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ, it is followed by ayn. And we said ayn is from the letters of izhar. The letters of izhar are the letters of the halq. So وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ. We see the sign for izhar over the ba. While with azim, the letter that follows azim in the following verse is وَمِنَ النَّاسِ, is waw. And so, tanween followed by waw. Waw is from the letters of yarmulun, from the letters of idgham. And so these markings presume that one may possibly continue their recitation. وَلَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ وَمِنَ النَّاسِ, which is permissible. And thus we have the marking here of idgham. And so when we have this tatabu, yani one of the letters, one of the markings of tanween following the other and not sitting above it, then this is either idgham or ikhfa. And when we have them sitting one on top of the other, or we have this dhammatain, one dhamma with what resembles an upturned noon over the top, and this is the marking that indicates idhar. Similarly, we looked, I believe, previously at the permissible stoppages and the markings and the symbols that indicate permissible stopping. Here we have an example of that. ختم الله على قلوبهم وعلى سمعهم. We have this sad, la, sili. And we said that this sad and la indicates that wasl is awla, yani continuing with one's recitation is better. That is this sili. If you go down the page to the 13th verse, you'll see وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ آمِنُوا كَمَا آمَنَ النَّاسِ قَالُوا أَنُؤْمِنُ كَمَا آمَنَ السُّفَهَاءُ. Over sufaha, over the hamza, we have qili, qaf, lam, and ya, which is actually qaf, lam, and alif. And what that is indicating is that waqf is awla, yani it is better to stop. But both affairs are permissible. With sili and qili, the indication is to what is better and not what is lazim. Those two markings, I believe, we looked at previously. On this same verse, وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ آمِنُوا كَمَا آمَنَ النَّاسِ. If you look at the statement of Allah, آمِنُوا, you'll see after the waw, there is an alif with a small circle over the alif. This, whenever it occurs in the Quran, in the Mus'haf, is from the letters that were present and that were drawn and written within the Mus'haf. And so It was transcribed as it was written, but these letters are not recited. So when you see those letters, the alif with this circle above it, it indicates a letter that was written in the Mus'haf of Uthman, and it was present, but it is not recited, which is an indication of the fact, the clear indication of the fact that the Quran is taken bit-talaqqi. It is taken, ikhwan, it is not something that returns back to opinion and ra'i. Rather, it is taken generation after generation from the mouths of the people who took it from the Messenger of Allah ﷺ, and then from their teachers and from their teachers and so on. And so this alif with the circle above it, it was present but it was not recited. And thus, those who transcribe the Quran in our time, they write it as it was present, but it is not to be recited. Another indication of the fact that this Mus'haf, the Book of Allah Azza wa Jal, was taken bit-talaqqi, and it was revelation that indicated how the Quran should be written, how the Quran should be ordered, is that which is present from the mad al-tabi'i that is present over some letters and within some of the words of the Quran. What we're ordinarily acquainted with in the Arabic language outside of the Book of Allah Azza wa Jal, and the writing of the Arabic language outside of the Book of Allah Azza wa Jal, is that when a letter has mad tabi'i, then it is extended with an alif. But in many places in the Quran, you will find, though the origin is mad al-tabi'i and it is recited with mad al-tabi'i, but it is written with what is known as the khanjara. And this khanjara, which is literally the Arabic for a dagger, it is present in many of the words in the Quran. If you go back to the top of the page, the same page, if you look at the 7th verse, which is the second verse on this page, ختم الله على قلوبهم وعلى سمعهم وعلى أبصارهم. If you look at أبصارهم and غشاوة, you'll see this khanjara. That is after alif, yani hamza, ba, sad, immediately after the sad, before the ra, you'll see this small dagger. This small dagger, ordinarily outside of the Book of Allah Azza wa Jal, absar, would be written with a alif connected to the sad. But why do we have this khanjara here in these places? Absarihim, ghishawa. Why are these present within these places? Because this is how the Mus'haf of Uthman was written. And so it is written as it occurred within the Mus'haf. And we look at that, ikhwan, when we look at the affair of the ahruf and the qira'at from tomorrow, inshaAllah. So that is another thing to observe in relation to some of the markings that are present within the Quran. Another issue to look at in terms of markings, if you go across to the following page, يعني مثلهم كمثل الذي استوقد نارا, the top verse, you'll see فلما أضاءت ما حوله. At the end of the verse, you'll see a very small waw after the ha. And if you go down similarly to verse 22, you want to make it easy for you, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 lines down. The beginning of that verse, فَأَخْرَجَ بِهِ مِنَ الثَّمَرَاتِ, you'll see a very small ya after the ha. And that, of course, is an indication of mad tabi'i. since it is mad sila, silatun sughra. And so this ya that is after the ha and the waw that is after the ha here indicates that there is something of elongation. فَلَمَّا أَضَاءَتْ مَا حَوْلَهُ ما حوله مد طبيعي مقدار حركتين فأخرج به مقدار حركتين مد صلة, and here it is مد صلة صغرى. That then is another one of the markings that we want to observe. And while we're on that note, if you go over to the following page, وَبَشِّرِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, after that verse, the first verse, the following verse, it begins إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَسْتَحْيِي. Here again, ikhwan, this is another issue, just as a side point, another error that is commonly made in the recitation of يَسْتَحْيِي is the ha of yastahi is recited with kasrah. Yudabbih, as occurs in some verses, when Allah Azza wa Jalla speaks of that which Fir'aun used to do, وَيَسْتَحْيِي نِسَاءَكُمْ. The ha, ikhwan, has sukoon upon it and not kasrah. And a common error that occurs is the recitation of يستحيي as يستحي with kasra upon the ha and not sukoon. So this again is another affair that should be made clear. يستحيي. In any case, after the statement لا يستحيي, we have that long, we have the same ya, but above the ya we have the same symbol that was present in mad lazim. And that, of course, is an indication of mad lazim. That is the origin. And so here we should be clear of the fact that the elongation is not the same as the elongation that is present with the previous examples. That is, here we have the ya na'am. But then we have this long elongation. And so this elongation, أيها الإخوة, differs in length. And we should set this, if it was in the masjid, ikhwan, we would set this as homework, or any of you, ikhwan, who are able to contact me, then you can do so and tell me what type of mad this mad is and why we have this symbol over the top of the ya. Another one of the issues that we want to look at is that which is related to the markings that are present in the margins of the Quran. On this same page, upon the very same verse, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَسْتَحْيِي, if you look at the margin just prior to إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَسْتَحْيِي, you should have a small box that has written within it Rub al-Hizb, and then Raqam Wahid below it, number 1. Next to that you have a star that we do not see in the rest or anywhere else on the rest of the page. And that is an indication, Ikhwan, of one of the methods of the division and the segregation of the portions of the Quran. You, I'm sure, will be familiar with the fact that the Quran is divided into 30 ajza, 30 juz. The 30 juz of the Quran, yani from its beginning to end, within those ajza, there is another form of division. And that is, every juz is further divided into ahzab, into a hizb. And the hizb, in essence, is half of the juz. Yani the juz is split into 2, and those 2 portions are considered or referred to as a hizb or ahzab, plural. So every juz has 2 hizb. The hizb is then itself broken down further into 4 quarters. And those quarters are referred to by the Arabic word ruba', which is a reference to a quarter. And so each juz is divided into 2 hizb, is split into 2. Each hizb is then split into 4. So we have 8 ahzab per juz. This box that we see here then is a marking or a box that indicates the first juz, the first ruba' that we've come to, the first quarter of the first hizb. And so if you look from here, you'll see Rub' al-Hizb, a quarter of the Hizb. And then it says Rub' al-Hizb al-Awwal, that is the first quarter of the first Hizb. If you turn the page, again you'll see a similar box. And if you follow the box across the ayah, you'll see the same star that you won't see and find anywhere else in the page. And then within the box, you'll see Nisf al-Hizb, half of the Hizb. That is a reference to the second ruba' of the first Hizb. Nisf al-Hizb al-Awwal. If you turn the page again, you'll see another box. And that box has within it ثلاثة أرباع الحزب الأول, 3 quarters of the first hizb, and then you'll see the same star. And as an example of the idhar, while we're here, if you look up 2 lines at the end of the verse, you'll see قولا, يعني فبدل الذين ظلموا قولا. That tanween is an example of idhar, as we mentioned previously. So if we continue over to the next page, you'll see al-Hizb al-Thani, the second Hizb. And so we have then, with that, 4 quarters of the first half, the first Hizb of the juz. And if we continue over in a similar manner, you'll see Rub' al-Hizb al-Thani. Again, if we continue, you'll see Nisf al-Hizb al-Thani. You go over again, you'll see ثلاثة أرباع الحزب الثاني. You go over again, and you'll see al-Juz al-Thani, the second juz. with the same star that is present. So those small boxes are again further divisions within the juz of the Quran. And so you may, for example, wish you don't have much time, but you want to recite something from the Quran. So you recite something short. And so you take just a rubu', for example. Or you want to revise some of the Quran. And so you revise a rubu' or two rubu'. And these are all markings that bring benefit to the qari'ah. Another one of the markings that we'll look at, if you turn, ikhwan, to Surah Al-Qiyamah. Surah Al-Qiyamah. And Surah Al-Qiyamah. So if you turn to page 577, you'll see the beginning of Surah Al-Qiyamah. If you go over, follow the surah over to the following page, the third line down, second verse across. أفتكلا إذا بلغت التراقي وقيل من راق. Over the noon, we have this small scene. This small scene, ikhwan, is an indication of a sector. And we discussed the affair of waqf and wasl. And we discussed similarly the sakatat, that is the sector. As we said, the sector, ikhwan, is that a person stops momentarily, but it is not the type of stop wherein he will take a breath. Rather, it is a momentary stop. This is an example of one, and that is the symbol for the sector. That is why it is seen, of course. وَقِيلَ مَنْ رَاقٍ. And so it is a brief stop, momentary stop, that is not like a complete waqf. That is not to be confused, though, with, if we go back to Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 245, which is at the bottom of the page, you'll see after the jim, which indicates the jawaz or the permissibility of stopping, you'll see Wallahu yaqbidu wa yabsutu. And over the sad, we have a scene. This scene, ikhwan, is not the same as the scene of the sector. This scene, when it occurs over a sad, then it is an indication of the fact that that sad is to be recited as seen. And the main difference between the two is that you'll see that the scene that we're referring to here occurs beneath the harakah, while the scene of the sector occurs above the harakah. And so here, in the qira'ah and the recitation of Hafs and Asim, or the riwayah of Hafs and Asim, يقبض ويبسط was recited with sin. يبسط. And so it is written as sad because, of course, that is how the word occurs in the Mus'haf, but it is recited as sin. And this is, of course, a permissible lugha from the lughat of the Arab. And so that is indicated and made clear here with that scene. And so we differentiate between the two scenes that are present over some words, one of them indicating a sector, the other indicating that that sad is to be recited as seen. We'll move on, ikhwan, to another symbol if you turn to verse 41 of Surah Hud. If you turn to Surah Hud, verse 41. And it is on page 226 of the Mus'haf. Verse 41 is the verse where you see that nisf al-hizb marking at the side of the page. The line down, you'll see another box. And there is some very, very minute writing within that box. What it actually says, imalatu al-alif ila al-ya. And if we recite from waqala down to the second line, Bismillahi majreha. Even though it appears to be majraha, this is the example that we mentioned previously of al-imala. And imala, ikhwan, we said, was one of the methods in which the Arab would recite certain letters with a haraka that resembled, or that which was between kasra and fatha. And so it is not Bismillahi majraha, neither is it Bismillahi majriha. Rather, imala is between the two, majreha. And in Hafs, it occurs in this one place. But in some riwayat and in some qira'at, you'll find that it occurs regularly. Qira'at warsh, مثلا. قالون صحف إبراهيم وموسى سبح اسم ربك الأعلى. This imala in Hafs occurs in one place. And this is that one place. The point that we're trying to highlight here, though, is the marking for imala, and that is that line underneath the word. In many masahif, though, you will not see the line. You will only see either what resembles a diamond under the ra, or in some masahif, it will be a small black circle underneath the letter. That is an indication of al-imala. We move on, ikhwan, to Surah Al-A'raf, verse 12. Surah Al-A'raf, verse 12, which is the second page, or at the top of the second page of Surah Al-A'raf, page 152 in the Mus'haf. قال ما منعك أن لا تسجد إذ أمرتك قال أنا خير منه خلقتني من نار وخلقته من طين. This قال أنا, if you look at the أنا, you'll see over the alif of ana, that is the alif that is connected to the na. And again, this is an indication, ikhwan, of the fact that the Mus'haf was written as it occurred. It was copied as it occurred. In some places we have alif indicating this mad tabi'i, and in some places we have this khanjara or the dagger. And so it's copied as it occurred. This ana, if you look over it, you'll see a small circle. And that circle is different from the circle that we mentioned earlier with the letters that are written but are not pronounced and not recited. This circle returns back to the alifat. If you remember, Ikhwan, we discussed the alifat that are present within the Quran, that when we stop upon them, we recite them, but if we make wasl, then they are not recited. And this circle indicates this alif. قال أنا خير. If we make wasl and we continue, أنا خير منه. But if we stop, قال أنا, it returns. Those then, Ikhwan, are, of course, Ikhwan, the time's running out, Ikhwan, but those are the vast majority, if not almost all, of the markings that you should be aware of and acquainted with. That is as it occurs in the regular Mus'haf. If we move on quickly to the Tajweed Mus'haf, then there are some slight differences in the Tajweedi Mus'haf, and I've tried to advance some of the markings that are present within the Mus'haf. There are some things that you may have believed or may perceive, it's just bad typesetting, but in actuality they are present for reasons. If we return back then, if you open the Tajweed Mus'haf, that is the one with the colourful letters, if you open it back to the first page in Surah Al-Baqarah, well, the second page after the colourful page, after the decorated page, we'll try and discuss these colours, Ikhwan, and one or two other issues as quickly as possible. The first of the colours that we'll look at then is the dark red or the mauve type colour. If you go to the beginning, the very beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, from the Alif Lam Mim, you'll see the Lam and the Mim are in mauve, or dark pink or burgundy, whatever you want to refer to, however you want to refer to its hue. That is an indication, Ikhwan, of Mad Lazim. That is an indication of Mad Lazim. Then that lighter pink, slightly lighter pink, is a reference to Mad that is Jaiz. Afwan, Mad Wajib. Mad Wajib. And that is a reference to Mad Muttasil. Maddun. That, of course, you'll be familiar with, Ikhwan, Mad Muttasil. It likewise refers to Mad al-Munfasil and Mad al-Silatu al-Kubra. So this one color is used for these three types of Mad. Mad al-Muttasil, al-Mad al-Munfasil, and Mad al-Silatu al-Kubra. And so all of these are recited for 4 or 5 harakat, as we discussed previously. As far as the dark orange, then the dark orange is a reference to the Mad that is Jaiz, the Mad that is permissible, and this is a reference to Mad al-Arid lis-Sukun and Mad al-Lin. And the lighter orange is a reference to Mad Tabi'i, So if you look at this first page, Alif Lam Mim, Lam and the Mim, Mad Lazim, and you'll see it's in that darker, that purple. If you go down the page, وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِمَا أُنزِلَ إِلَيْكَ وَمَا أُنزِلَ مِن قَبْلِكَ, you have here mad munfasil, and so it is in that lighter purple or pink. If you go back up to the top of the page, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ, you'll see this all in orange, though ذَلِكَ and kitab is in a lighter orange since that is mad طبيعي. Fi is in a darker orange since it is a place that one can stop, and so it would be considered mad al-arid lil-sukun. Hudan lil-muttaqeen is in the darker orange, again because of the fact that it is mad al-arid lil-sukun. الذين يؤمنون بالغيب ويقيمون الصلاة. Here we have two issues. We have the lighter orange, which is a reference to mad tabi'i, and then we have grey, which is a new color. Grey refers and is used either for idgham and for that which is not recited. And so those letters that are not recited because of idgham or otherwise, then we have this grey indicating that they are not to be recited. The two blues, dark blue and the lighter blue, as far as dark blue is concerned, then it is a reference to tafkhim. And so that indicates the sifa and the characteristic of the letter. الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْغَيْبِ وَيُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةِ. Ghain, qaf, sad, these are huruf mufakhama, and so they're in dark blue. While the light blue refers to qalqala. And so you'll see وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ, qaf from the huruf of qutb jad, huruf of qalqala. And then further down the page, وَمَا أُنزِلَ مِن قَبْلِكَ, min qablik. Here again qalqala. The ba is in the light, the qaf in the dark blue, which indicates tafkhim, the ba in the light blue, which indicates qalqala. And the last of the colors is this green. As far as the green is concerned, then the green refers to ikhfa and those letters that have ghunna upon them. So for example, with the green, the first green that occurs on this page, وَمِمَّا, here, meme followed by meme with shadda upon it, we have ghunna, وَمِمَّا. While if you look at the following letter that is marked in green, رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ, this is a letter and this is a reference to ikhfa. And so the green, yani yunfiqun, is from the letters of an example of ikhfa. And so the green is used for ikhfa, and it is also used for ghunna, or letters that have in them ghunna. If you go down a line, وَالَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِمَا أُنزِلَ إِخْفَاء وَمَا أُنزِلَ إِخْفَاء من قبلك إخفاء. Then the last line, مِن رَبِّهِمْ. Again, we have here an example of idgham. Since Ra, Nun Sakina followed by Ra. Ra is from the letters of Yarmalun. So we have idgham. But we have idgham here بغير غنة, without غنة. And so the Ra is indicated with tafkhim, since it is Ra with fatha upon it. And again, you remember Ra, if it has fatha upon it, it is mufakham. If it has dhamma upon it, it is mufakham. But if it has kasra upon it, it is muraqqaq. And so it is dark green. So that is as far as the colors are concerned. If you look and turn over the page, one or two things to point out before we round up. The first issue is after the first line, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا سَوَاءٌ عَلَيْهِمْ, to the second ayah, خَتَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ وَعَلَى سَمْعِهِمْ. Here we have sili, and then we have something of a space. And you've probably thought previously, I don't like this mushaf because they don't seem to have typeset the text correctly. In actuality, these spaces, ikhwan, are intentional. And it is a part of the method that they've tried to employ with helping with some of the rulings of Tajweed. And that is that whenever we have a waqf that is jaiz, or we have a waqf, yani we have sili indicating that wasl is awla but you can stop, or qili indicating that waqf is awla, waqf is better but you can continue. Anywhere where we have one of the permissible types of stoppages, then we have this space, a slight space between the place of stopping and the following letter, and that is an indication of this waqfa, of this stopping. So if you look, ختم الله على قلوبهم وعلى سمعهم, we have this space. وعلى أبصارهم غشاوة, we have another space. ولهم عذاب عظيم. And so these spaces are to, or the indication or the intent is to help you familiarize yourself with the places that it is permissible for you to stop. Another issue, if you look at, if we go back to the same spot that we were just reading, ختم الله على قلوبهم وعلى سمعهم وعلى أبصارهم غشاوة, over the harakat of ghishawa, that is over the tanween and over the ta of ghishawa, you'll see two boxes. One box encircles the tanween, and one surrounds. That was an oxymoron, ikhwan. One box encircles. One box surrounds the tanween, and the other surrounds the nuqat, yani the dots. The box that surrounds the tanween and surrounds the dots are placed to highlight to you that there is a difference in relation to these harakat and these dots if you stop or if you continue. If you continue, then of course one continues observing the harakat and the dots. But if one were to stop upon ghishawa, then the tanween will disappear. Similarly, the nuqat, those dots will disappear. And it will no longer be ghishawatun, but it will now become ghishawa with sukun. And the ta will become ha, as we've previously discussed. And so those boxes indicate that if you do stop, then something related to the ruling within those boxes is going to be affected. And if you go down 3 lines, في قلوبهم مرض فزادهم الله مرضا, you'll see a box over the dad. The box, if you look inside it, you'll see tanween, and you'll see in terms of the markings of tanween, there is this tarakub, and we said this afwan tatabu, that is that one line comes slightly after the other. That is because if you were to continue, then we have here idgham. فزادهم الله مرضا ولهم. But if you stop, then this box indicates that the harakat are going to change. There's something is going to be affected. And of course now we have the fathatain becoming one fatha, marada. And so the box indicates then that the harakat, if you stop this harakat that is within this box, and the ruling that is present within this box is going to be affected, so pay attention. And finally we'll mention about this Tajweedi Quran or Mus'haf. If we move from this page 2, and this final marking that we'll discuss is again an attempt by the committee who compiled this Mus'haf, or who presented the Mus'haf, an attempt to aid with something related to Tajweed. طيب, if we turn to Surah Hud, the end of Surah Hud, the same page that Surah Yusuf begins on, which is page 235. If you look at the top of the page, وَلَوْ شَاءَ رَبُّكَ لَجَعَلَ النَّاسَ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً وَلَا يَزَالُونَ مُخْتَلِفِينَ إِلَّا مَنْ رَحِمَ رَبُّكَ. You'll notice that the marker that indicates the number of the ayah at the end of the verse, and incidentally with the Mus'haf, I'm sure you should be acquainted with the fact that the verses, or the verse numbers come at the end of the verse. And so if you look at 118 is not what is to come, but 118 is what has preceded. If you look at the ayah marker, then after the first verse at the top of the page, verse 118, you'll notice that the bottom of the marker is slightly darker than the other markers, that indicate the number of the verses. Not one in particular. And if you flick through the Quran and through the Mus'haf, you'll see other examples of that. What they have tried to do here is indicate the fact that these verses are strongly connected in meaning. And so this, of course, will aid with stoppage. And this is, of course, when we're discussing the affair of waqf wal ibtida. And so if you look at the verse that they've placed it upon, they've placed it between the statement of Allah, وَلَوْ شَاءَ رَبُّكَ لَجَعَلَ النَّاسَ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً, that if your Lord had willed, then he would have made the people one nation. وَلَا يَزَالُونَ مُخْتَلِفِينَ, but they will not cease to be at difference. They will not cease to differ. Then we have the marker. And what follows it? إِلَّا مَنْ رَحِمَ رَبُّكَ, except those whom your Lord has mercy upon. And so the following verse has a strong connection with the previous verse. And so it would not be befitting to stop after وَلَا يَزَالُونَ مُخْتَلِفِينَ without completing that which follows. And so that darker marking indicates the ayah marker. The one with the darker print at the bottom of the marker indicates, ikhwan, that the verse that has preceded has a strong connection with the verse that is to come. So you should be aware of that, pay attention to that. And with that then we come, ikhwan, to the end of some of the symbols and markings that we wanted to highlight. It should be known, ikhwan, particularly with this mushaf, that is the Tajweed mushaf, that there are a few versions of the Tajweed mushaf. There are a few versions, ikhwan, and they are not all the same. For example, the one that comes with, if some of you have seen the set with the pen, there's a set that comes with a pen. You put a battery in the pen has a speaker within it, and you press on the verse is recited through the speaker. And it is likewise a colorful Tajweed Quran. It is not the same as the one that we're reading from now. That was produced by someone else. This one had a body who worked upon the affair. It was given to a lejna, or a committee in Saudi Arabia, and it was given to a committee in Egypt who looked over the affair and looked over the mushaf. And so there are a number of other versions. I know of at least 2 other versions of this Tajweed mushaf. So the one that we're speaking of here is the one that has a chart at the bottom of the page that has these 8 colors and a small indication of what each of the colors represent. With that then, we come to the end, ikhwan, of that which we had intended to discuss briefly from the Ahkam of Tajweed and from an analysis of the text of Jazariyah. وأسأل الله عز وجل أن يتقبل قراءتنا ودروسنا وجلوسنا مع كتاب الله. That Allah عز وجل accepts from us our recitation and our sittings with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that Allah عز وجل makes us from those who recite the book of Allah throughout the day and throughout the night, and from those who it is said to them, اقرأ ورتل, on the day of judgment, read and recite as you used to recite in the dunya, and that their place in Jannah will be upon the last verse that they recite. نسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى يوفقنا وإياكم لما يحبه ويرضاه، وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. And we will بإذن conclude these sittings with a discussion from tomorrow, and we'll try and be as brief as possible around the affair of the ahruf and the qira'at, that is the dialects that the Quran was revealed in, and the